So we're going to be looking at factoring trinomials. So trinomials are polynomials that are in three terms. And this is a case where a equals 1. So down here's our general form for a trinomial. We have an x squared, bx plus c, and generally there's an a there. But in this video, we're going to focus on that numerical coefficient is just going to be a positive 1. Then in the next video, we'll look at what happens when we plug in numbers there. So this is our general form for a trinomial. So we have these two numerical coefficients, b and c, which is actually our constant term that we're going to be working with. So what we want to do is get from this form here to a factored form, which means multiplying pieces will have x and x, but then we have to fill in the blank in terms of plus and minus, plus or minus. We'll have to figure that out, and we need to figure out the numbers that go here so that if we FOIL out these expressions, we want to end up back at the original. So we're going to learn some tools for how can we figure out positive and negatives and the numbers that fill in the blank there to make this work. So let's work in reverse. Let's say we have a factored form, and with that, see how we get to our trinomial. So here's a factored form. So we're going to FOIL. So we're going to have x times x, which is x squared. Outer x times 3 plus 3x. Inner terms, 2 times x. And last terms, 2 times 3. So positive 6. And then just combining our like terms there, we can see we have x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now what we want to see is how these numbers work together with that 2 and 3 that are coming through in the factored form. So the numbers that we're seeing here, so again, this 5 is representing what b is, and 6 is representing what c is. Well, this value for b, in this case, is coming from 2 plus 3. Adding the two numbers together in the factored form give us that coefficient of b. So this comes from addition, and our value for c comes from multiplying the two values together. So 2 times 3, so this is coming from multiplication. So in order to work in reverse here, and even I know we just did the work for that one, but let's say if I just went to the side here and gave us this trinomial, even though we just saw the factored form, the idea is taking this and thinking about what two numbers add up to 5 and multiply to 6. And what we're going to end up doing is starting with the values that multiply to 6 because there's less of them. Like in this case, if we think about all the numbers that add up to 5, it's like 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 5 and 0. There's a lot more than in terms of multiplication. So something we're going to do is take our value for c and think about the possible factors. So for a positive 6, and noting the sign is going to be important. So it's a positive 6. So we could have a 1 and 6. We could even have negative 1 and negative 6. We could have 2 and 3. We could have negative 2 and negative 3. So with this, we have all of the values that are possible for getting us this value of 6 for c because they multiply. But then what we want to do is think about the addition. So if we add these together, which gives us 5, and it's going to be the 2 plus 3. So with that, it would give us our factored form. So we're just going to have x and x. But then looking over here, these values will fill in the blank for what goes here. So it's a positive 2, so that'll give us plus 2, and a positive 3, which will give us positive 3. So that's the method I'm going to go through with these. There's a lot of different ways to do these, so if you already have practiced these skills in a different way, use the methods you already know. But I'm going to go through this form of looking at the factors of C and then finding the ones that add up to B, and that'll give you your two numbers that fill in the blank there. All right, let's look at some examples. So, and I just realized we just did this one. Let's say we change the sign of it. Let's make that negative. There we go. All right. Say this is x squared minus 5x plus 6. So I already listed the factors up above there, so I'll just copy those down again. So the factors don't change, and we're still dealing with a positive 6. But now what I want to do is see which of these add up to negative 5. And that's going to be this negative 2 and negative 3. If I think about adding those together, that would give us a negative 5. So for the factored form, I'm going to have x, and then negative 2 means I'll have minus 2, and negative 3 means that I'll have minus 3. And when you get to the factored forms, just keep in mind that you can always check. All you'll do is FOIL it out. Just make sure that when you check, it's separate from the work. Sometimes students then just FOIL this out and then write x squared minus 5x plus 6, but that's not the factored form. So if you do check your answer, I always like to write a little note and do it off to the side. So if we FOIL x times x, x squared, minus 2x minus 3x plus 6, and that'll get you back to the original answer. But for the factored form, we have our piece up here. All right, x squared minus 2x minus 35. So negative 35, and I want to think about what numbers multiply to negative 35. So I could have a negative 1 and positive 35. I could have the reverse, 1 and negative 35. And then negative 5 and 7, 5 and negative 7. And what I want is two numbers that add up to negative 2, and that's going to be this 5 and negative 7. So right there. So to factor it, I'm going to have my two pieces. We'll have x and x. We need a positive 5 and a negative 7. So we'll have x plus 5 times x minus 7. All right, and our last one here has two variables. It's not going to change too much when we do that. It's just that when we get to this general form where I always start with x, that'll still be there. And then our value on the right-hand side will actually also have a variable of y, but I still need to fill in the blank for some numbers here, and that method isn't going to change. I'm going to focus on the number where c is, which in this case is negative 8. And I'm just going to list out the factors, so I could have a 1 and negative 8, negative 1 and 8, negative 2 and 4, 2 and negative 4. And I want the one that adds up to negative 7, and that's going to be this first one that I wrote. So we need a positive 1, so x plus and then 1 times y, but I'm just going to leave the 1 off there since it's implied as the coefficient there, and then negative 8. So I'm listing out all of the numbers here just so that you can kind of see the exhaustive list. The more you do these, the more little tricks you find, and you even start to be able to kind of pick out the numbers, especially with smaller numbers, that like negative 7 was never going to come from 2 and 4 in any form together. So with that, you can skip steps here. I just want to show it all written out and where these numbers are coming from.